So I'm at a spot at the moment called the Bronte Bell Chapel in Thornton, which is a kind of village on the edge of Bradford. And I've come here because one of the scenes in the novel Layla and Emily, it takes place in this spot, and in fact it takes place with the two of the girls sitting on the very bench that I'm sitting on. So what happens in the scene, it's a scene where Layla and Aysha and their two co-wives of the imam in the mosque in Bradford, they go on a visit to Aysha's aunt and uncle, and the uncle, he's a bit of a sleazy guy, and Aysha isn't comfortable, and so Layla and Aysha go out for a walk and they end up here. And of course the novel is about how Emily Bronte keeps visiting Layla in her dreams, and so it's almost like Emily has led her to this place. And this place is significant because Patrick Bronte, Emily's father, was curate here for years, and indeed the Bronte sisters were all born up the road in a house up there. So and that's why I wanted to include Thornton in the novel, because this is actually where they were born. And what I wanted to do is stress the connections between Layla, who's from a Muslim background, she lives like 150 years later, and Emily, they've actually got a lot more in common than it initially seems. And of course one of these is they're both born in Bradford, because this is technically in Bradford, and so without realizing it, Layla goes to Emily's birthplace and she has that other connection. But actually the main point of this scene, and it was one that I particularly enjoyed writing and I was particularly satisfied with, was to give some depth to Aysha. Now Aysha's a very interesting character. She's the underage co-wife of Layla. So basically Layla can't have children, or at least chooses not to have children. And so the mother-in-law pressures the husband to get a co-wife, and she's 17. I mean, according to UK law, they shouldn't be married, and of course it's not a legal marriage anyway, it's a religious marriage. And she comes from a Pakistani background, whereas the others are from like Lebanese heritage. So there's a bit of racial tension in places with the mother-in-law, who kind of looks down on Aysha, but she also likes Aysha because Aysha gets pregnant, whereas Layla doesn't, and mother-in-law's sole concern is heirs. And so Aysha's this kind of ambiguous figure, because on the one hand she's a bit of a villain because she comes into Layla's life and basically takes her husband off her. But then on the other hand, Layla's not that into her husband anyway. She never really wanted to marry him in the first place. And so having him taken off is a bit of a relief in some ways. But then at the same time, she comes in and she degrades Layla's status. She throws into focus Layla's failings, and of course her prime failing is not being able to have children, and also the sex life isn't great between the husband and Layla, and so she contrasts that by being very into it. And so she's this villain, but also not quite, and yet at the same time, because she's a child, she's as much, if not more than a victim than anybody else. And during the scene, it's a scene where basically Aysha speaks for herself properly in the first time in the novel, perhaps the only time in the novel really, and her childlikeness comes through. She's ignorant of life. She's about to become a mother, and she's clearly not ready. She's clearly not ready to be a wife. She's clearly not ready for adulthood, and yet there she is, thrown into this situation in a way that was not of her choosing, essentially. I mean, we don't know. I mean, one presumes she said yes to the marriage, but my guess is that most 17-year-olds are not going to be dreaming about marrying a guy twice their age who's already married. So she's probably said yes to a piece of family, and of course the imam that she marries is descended from a companion of the Prophet, so there's a certain religious kudos on marrying an imam and such a one with auspicious ancestry. And of course he's Arab, and whilst it's often said that Islam is not a racially based religion, I think there is a certain kudos with Arabian ancestry and an Arabian heritage that will be noted by Aysha's family. But there we are, Aysha, beyond all control of her own life. She is yet another woman like Layla who has no control over her life. She's thrown into this situation that she doesn't understand, and this little scene in the Bell Chapel in Thornton is where we get to know her as a person. And I hope when you read it, you feel for her and you have compassion for her. So that's it. Thanks for listening.